There are legends that stand at the center of the canvas, heroes, architects, and villains whose names shape the fate of the world. The restless, stubborn, endlessly inventive beings who filled the world with chaos, laughter, and memory. The Gestrals and Grandis are not the ones who built the laws of the canvas, but they are the ones who gave it life. From the first wild carnival battles of Verso's childhood, to the grand arenas of poetry and stone, to the ruined villages and secret remnants that survived the fracture, these beings have watched and shaped every era of the painted world. They lived, fought, built, and rebuilt, carrying the scars of every loss and the spark of every new beginning. Their story is not just a chronicle of survival, but a testament to what it means to create, to remember, and to endure when the world keeps changing around you. My name is Vigil, and this is Video Game Lore. Everything you'll hear in this episode has been drawn from the game's narrative, the fragments of dialogue and environmental storytelling, and the subtle clues left in the corners of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Where the lore is silent, I'll be using careful speculation to fill in the gaps and entwine it with what is fact, because these are characters whose stories deserve to be told with care. This is the untold saga of the Gestrals and the Grandis, the misfits, the builders, the fighters, and the keepers of memory. Let's begin. Verso Dessendre cherished the Fête Foraine, the carnival that filled his childhood with color, excitement, and escape. He delighted in the rides, the sweets, and the thrill of winning plush toys, but it was the spectacle of the wrestlers that captivated him the most. Among the prizes and memories, he carried a constant companion, a puffy plush named Esquier, who may have been one at the carnival itself. Esquier became his silent guardian, a comforting presence to lean on during the worst moments, especially when the relentless weight of parental expectation threatened to crush his love for music beneath the demand that he become a painter. When Verso played, Esquier was always by his side. He would gather the wooden mannequins used for drawing gesture figures, glue paintbrushes atop their heads, and stage battles, recreating the epic matches he loved to watch at the Fête Foraine. With affection, he named these makeshift combatants the Gestrals. He would place them in large containers to where just their brush tops would stick out, reminiscent of a paintbrush holder. Eventually, under the mounting pressure from his parents, Verso began work on his very first canvas. He poured into it everything he loved, a whimsical world with candied cavern systems, rolling mountains, a riot of color and lollipop-shaped trees, endless flower fields, flowing streams, a small carnival, and a giant toy box playground. Eager to see his childhood playthings come to life, he began to give form to his wooden figures, calling these sentient creations the half-baked Gestrals. While their shapes mirrored the mannequin figures he played with in the real world, they were marked by distinct smatterings of glowing paint, each one a work in progress, a living draft. Verso's focus was on their love for fighting, so that he and Esquier could test their skills against formidable opponents. As a result, he didn't grant them a high degree of intelligence. What the half-baked Gestrals lacked in cunning, they made up for with sheer fighting prowess. An unbreakable stubbornness, a dog-like loyalty reminiscent of Monoko, and a natural love of commerce and trade. Soon, Verso noticed that Esquier's power far surpassed that of the Gestrals, sometimes vaporizing them into paint dust. To address this imbalance, Verso endowed them with the ability to go full brush mode, a transformation that allowed them to increase in size and strength so they can endure more of Esquier's attacks, at least until a better solution could be found. For centuries, the half-baked Gestrals lived lives of play and battle, riding the rides at the carnival, testing their mettle against the creatures Verso created for them, and healing from their constant injuries in the soothing pools and rivers Verso had designed for their recovery. When Verso returned to the real world, the Gestrals remained, their world continuing on in his absence. They were not alone. Eileen, Remoire, and Clea would visit the canvas on occasion, invited by Verso to marvel at his new creations and even celebrate a birthday or two. The half-baked Gestrals began to idolize their creator, with some of them dressing up as Verso himself, eager to emulate the figure who had given them life. This existence, marked by combat, celebration, and a childlike devotion to their creator, continued undisturbed for nearly 16,000 years, until Verso and Clea decided it was time to begin anew. Painting a fresh new layer atop the canvas, and building a new world above. When Verso was around 11 or 12 years old, he asked Clair to spend time with him in the canvas again, as he wanted to evolve his world. She agreed on the condition they pushed it beyond the childlike whimsical nature he had created. When the time came to build anew, Verso bid farewell to the half-baked Gestrals, taking Esquier with him as he and Clair ascended into the next layer of the canvas. Together, they painted over the old world, sealing the half-baked Gestrals beneath, their existence continuing in ignorance. Filled with speculation about what their new versions might look like and finding joy in the land Verso had left behind. With Clair's help, Verso shaped the land of the new canvas, and then, alongside Esquier, began the work of creating life once more. The first to emerge were the Gestrals, their designs now perfected in Verso's mind. Unlike their predecessors, the new Gestrals were given a form less ethereal and more substantial. A solid wooden structure, painted with unique markings that set each apart. Verso preserved their fighting spirit, but also endowed them with greater intelligence and an aptitude for building and creation. Yet, the most profound gift he gave them was the power of reincarnation. Inspired by the cycle of life and death he had witnessed with his family dogs. Each Minoko followed by another, similar but never the same. Verso instilled in the Gestrals the ability to return after death. Each rebirth carried with it fewer memories of previous lives, ensuring that every Gestral was granted a new beginning and a chance to experience life differently each time. To facilitate this endless cycle, Verso created the sacred river. Just as a paintbrush is cleaned in water and to be renewed, so too did the Gestrals. Chroma had to be offered for their return and used as a building block for their rebirth. Gestrals could be reborn through two methods: after a natural death or after a sudden or violent end. Their natural life cycle was marked by growth. Gestrals grew taller as they aged, until upon reaching the height of a tree, their joints stiffened, and they bowed their heads and crossed their arms across their chest, becoming towering statues. This state, known as queuing, allowed their chroma to slowly seep back into the earth, eventually finding its way to the sacred river for rebirth. At the river, a giant Gestral spirit, reminiscent of the half-baked Gestrals from Verso's earliest drafts, waited. The spirit would reach into the water and pull forth the reborn Gestral in child form. For those who died suddenly or by accident, their remains were placed in cocoon-like jars, similar to the ones Verso had once used to store his creations in the real world. These jars were delivered to the sacred river, where the spirit would submerge them and retrieve a new life in their place. Every reborn Gestral was assigned a guardian. The guardian took on a parental role, raising and training the young until they were capable of independence. In many cases, guardian and Gestral would become lifelong companions, alternating between roles of mentor and mentee across the cycles of rebirth. Some pairs grew into life mates, sharing the journey of existence together, supporting each other through every new beginning. Verso, meanwhile, continued to come and go from the canvas, each absence allowing the world and the Gestrals to evolve in new directions. The society had set in motion adapted, grew, and flourished, the cycles of conflict, commerce, and companionship echoing the patterns of memory and renewal that defined the very heart of this world. The Gestrals were not the only beings Verso brought to life in this new layer of the canvas. Even in his earliest drafts, Verso's imagination had conjured up a whimsical creature, the Barba Susette, created as a training partner for the Gestrals, a towering troll-like figure with cotton candy hair, massive lollipop weapons, and a body of living stone, and a mask of the same unyielding mineral. The Barba Susette was a living playground challenge, a test of skill and strength for the half-baked Gestrals who longed to prove themselves. But where the Gestrals embodied Verso's love for the wrestlers of the Fête Foraine, the Grandis will become a reflection of his childhood vision of adulthood. In the new layer of the canvas, the Grandis emerged, tall, troll-like beings with gray hair, stone bodies, and solemn stone masks. They were modeled not just after the physical presence of adults, but after the towering authority figures Verso had witnessed in the Paris of 1891. That year, Paris was a city consumed by the fires of artistic revolution. Symbolism, led by Stéphane Mallarmé, had become the dominant poetic movement, favoring abstraction, dream logic, and metaphor over realism. But the movement was rocked by public betrayal. The poet Jean Marais, who had authored the Symbolist Manifesto itself, denounced symbolism as too complicated and un-French. What followed was an ideological war, fought not on the streets, but in the smoky cafes of the Latin Quarter, in Montmartre. with poets hurling barbed verse and rhetorical flourishes instead of fists. Verso, forever the watchful child, internalized these battles. When he created the Grandis, he made them in the embodiment of adult authority in the eyes of a child. Dignified, orderly scholars who settled all disputes through highly structured poetry and debate. For the Grandis, violence was never physical, but verbal, a contest of wit, rhyme, and reason that mirrored the literary duels of 1891 Paris. Their battles were fought in stanzas, their victories declared in metaphor. Yet the Grandis were not merely thinkers. In a child's eyes, adults hold the world together. They build the walls, clear the roads, and carry the burdens of civilization. Verso made the Grandis literal giants, stone masons and architects capable of shaping mountains and carving the very structure of the canvas. This was no accident. Verso's design choice to make them builders and geometric shapers is a direct nod to the real-world tradition of master masons, the unseen hands who constructed Paris's foundations. Despite their gravitas, the Grandis were also gentle, often helping those in need, and even a few venturing into the realm of fashion design, their artistry extending beyond stone to cloth and color. They lived deep in the mountains atop the highest peaks, leading lives balanced between building, poetry battles, and the oral tradition, passing down history not through written records, but through stories spoken and remembered. The interplay between Grandis and Gestrals was as lively and vivid as a child's imagination. The chaotic, dog-like Gestrals ran wild, looking for fights and trading goods, while the tall, majestic grandfatherly Grandis governed, built, and observed. They were the wise elders of the canvas, the keepers of order and tradition, in a world of joy and chaos. For a time, the Grandis and Gestrals coexisted in harmony, each fulfilling the role Verso had imagined for them. But nothing in the canvas remains unchanged forever. Soon, an event would unfold that would shake the very foundations of their world, setting in motion a new era of challenge and transformation. On December 33, 1905, tragedy struck the Dessendre family. Verso perished in a fire set within the manor, a calamity orchestrated by the writers through the manipulations of his sister, Alicia. In the aftermath, grief consumed the family, each member collapsing beneath the weight of loss in their own way. Alicia, severely burned, spent months in recovery as the manor was painstakingly repaired. Eileen, unable to bear the void left by her son's absence, fell into a deep depression. It was in this darkness that she took up Verso's canvas, carried it to her atelier, and stepped inside, seeking solace in the world he had left behind. Within the canvas, Eileen began anew. She painted a city she called Lumiere, an artistic vision of Paris as it existed in her memory and longing. With steady determination, she gave life to humans, imbuing them with purpose and possibility. As discussed in our previous video, the passage of time in the canvas was radically different. By my calculations, every real-world day equate to roughly 22.33 canvas years. Over the next 7 to 8 months, as Eileen came and went, the world inside the canvas aged over 4,000 years. In that span, humanity, the Grandis, and the Gestrals flourished, their destinies intertwined. During this era, the Grandis and Gestrals lived in harmony with the humans, exchanging knowledge and shaping each other's cultures. The Grandis, with their mastery of stone, worked alongside humans to construct cities of breathtaking architecture and luxury, while the Gestrals brought their love of commerce and challenge, building casinos and venues of chance in the heart of the city. Trains, engineered in partnership between Grandis and human ingenuity, stitched the world together, and a central hub was built in the Grandis Mountains, a marvel of stone and steel that carried travelers to every corner of the canvas. The fête forain, once a symbol of Verso's childhood joy, was reborn in the mountains. There, humans and Gestrals mingled, playing and celebrating together beneath the bright lights of the carnival. The Gestrals became tireless travelers, and seeking out anyone willing to test their mettle in a friendly fight. As centuries passed, the Grandis divided into 3 great tribes, each evolving its own traditions of battle, eloquence, and sculpture. They built grand arenas and coliseums to showcase their skills, not only as a measure of strength, but as a celebration of culture and unity. Every 4 years, the oratory games were held, epic poetry battles that sometimes lasted as long as 96 hours, echoing the intellectual rivalries of 1891 Paris. Yet, with time, the Grandis adopted a certain adult trait: inconvenience and laziness. Their philosophy became, if it isn't in the way, there's no need to do anything about it. This was seen in their willingness to let the dead remain where they fell, and later, leaving their adversaries' bodies unburied, a testament to their pragmatic, sometimes indifferent worldview. Inspired by human spectacles, the Gestrals built fighting arenas and transformed the Colosseum into a place not just for battle, but of love and devotion for their favorite champions. Eventually, their appetite for challenge led them to create their own battle machines, crafted from wood and cloth, formidable and ingenious. These titanic constructs, known as sacapatats, served both as combatants and roving protectors of the cities they cherished. For more than 4 millennia, life continued in relative harmony, a golden age of creativity, rivalry, and shared endeavor. But nothing in the canvas remains unchanged forever. A single catastrophic event would soon descend, forever altering the fate of the Grandis and the Gestrals, erasing most of their kind in an instant and shattering the world they had built together. Near the end of this golden age, Eileen re-entered the canvas and, longing for the family she had lost, created painted copies imbued with the memories of her loved ones. She resolved to spend the rest of her life within the canvas, living alongside these echoes, abandoning all concern for her own failing body in the real world. Renoir, discovering what she had done, entered Lumiere and saw the depth of the illusion that now held her captive. His pleas fell on deaf ears, and their argument escalated with a force that transcended words. What followed was a battle of such magnitude that it tore the very foundation of the painted world apart, and a giant monolith in its wake. The explosion that resulted would become infamous among all who survived. It was henceforth known as the Fracture. The city center of Lumiere was ripped from the continent and cast out to sea, leaving devastation in its wake. Countless humans perished instantly or were left to suffer in the chaos that followed. The Fracture reached even the Grandis in their high mountain homes, shattering the central train station and wiping out entire tribes. Many Grandis were killed or scattered, never to return home. The Gestrals fared no better. Their ornate cities were annihilated, with many queuing on the spot, their body turning to statues as their chroma returned to the earth. Where once there had been millions of Gestrals, now there remained only hundreds. Merchant Gestrals were exiled to distant lands, some lost forever, while others wandered the ruined world that had once been their playground. The catastrophe was only compounded by the arrival of the Nevrons. These beings, created in the aftermath, attacked not only humans, but also the Grandis and Gestrals, bringing unending chaos to what had once been a place of harmony and creation. Decades passed in this new world of ruin and survival. Slowly, the surviving Gestrals and Grandis began to regroup. Among the Gestrals, one stood apart, Golgra. Her strength was unparalleled, and she quickly became the protector and organizer of her kind, especially against the Nevron threat. Fierce, respected, and sometimes feared, Golgra's fighting power was so great that many Gestrals dared not cross her. Golgra appointed several Gestrals as searchers, sending them out to find any lost kin, including those who had returned from the Sacred River and wandered aimlessly since the Fracture. She gathered the best builders, and together found a new Gestral village, a home built not of ancient stone, but of wood and mud, a testament to how far they had been knocked back by calamity. The village's bustling bazaar operated on barter, but as the need to resurrect millions of Gestrals in the queue grew, chroma became a form of currency. Golgra's leadership was fair but unyielding. She demanded respect for the laws she put in place and insisted on the construction of a large arena to give Gestrals something to be excited for. Arena fights were closely regulated, permitted only under the oversight of the arena itself, to prevent further loss of life and unnecessary additions to the queue. Some, defiant, organized secret brush mode tournaments, no-holds-barred contests, pitting Gestrals against each other and even against new, engineered sacapatats. Golgra's reach was long. She would hear of these illegal battles, leap across the continent with her powerful legs, and end them without mercy, often killing those who defied her and placing them at the end of the queue. Resource scarcity and Golgra's personal disdain for loud, unruly Gestrals led her to strictly limit how many could be reborn at a time. Though the exact mechanics of how she controlled this natural cycle remain a mystery, it was enforced with an iron will. She also commissioned the construction of sacapatats as guardians of both the village and the ancient sanctuary, and encouraged the use of Gestral ingenuity to develop construction equipment for expansion, some even attempting to bring back the lost glory of the old world with an elaborate casino strip. Yet nothing illustrated Golgra's ruthlessness more than her encounter with the Grandis engineer. a moment that would show the true lengths she was willing to go to protect the order she had built from the ruins. In the aftermath of the fracture, not all Gestrals were content to accept Golgra's new order. A large group, driven by an insatiable hunger for battle above all else, splintered from the Gestral village and gathered in the Endless Night Sanctuary, a forest dense with the petrified forms of Gestrals who had queued after dying in the chaos of the Cataclysm. Among them, a Grandis engineer, himself separated from his kin after the fracture, found his way to the sanctuary. There he discovered hundreds of Gestrals living together, constructing Sacapatats for their own private tournaments and constantly testing themselves and each other in combat. The Grandis engineer offered his expertise, helping them create even more formidable Sacapatats. Bonds of friendship grew between him and the Gestrals, their shared love of invention and combat fueling a period of wild innovation. But this harmony was short-lived. The Gestrals' lust for battle overtook all reason. They waged war after war, holding nothing back. Death followed death, sometimes inviting in hordes of Nevrons for a challenge. And the carnage became so constant that it overwhelmed the queue at the sacred river. They died and returned so often that their memories faded, and soon, even their grandest friend became a stranger to them. Unable to watch his friends destroy themselves, the Grandis engineer made the difficult choice to write a letter to the Gestral village, addressed to Golgra. In it, he expressed his deep concern for the fate of the Gestrals in the sanctuary. Golgra's response was swift and merciless. Without a word, she leapt across the continent and descended on the Endless Night Sanctuary in a fury. Her wrath was absolute. She slaughtered every Gestral present, showing no mercy and leaving none alive. The bodies were gathered and planted in the ancient sanctuary, condemned to the very end of the queue as a warning to any who might consider following their path. The Grandis engineer remained behind, tasked with keeping the memory of his lost friends alive. He continued to craft wandering Sacapatats, machines now more deadly than ever, for those who wished to test themselves in the sanctuary's shadow. Despite the devastation, the Grandis endured. Two of the three great tribes still survived, striving to live in peace and safety, while the world around them moved even closer to oblivion. Meanwhile, the surviving humans had begun to launch expeditions to destroy the painters, paths that would cross again and again with both Gestrals and the Grandis. Expedition 57, the Army Expedition, set out in force, equipped with siege engines and catapults. They made their way to the rock quarry, where one of the two remaining Grandis tribes still lived and worked, harvesting stone from the earth. The expedition scouted ahead and enlisted the Grandis' aid, relying on their mastery of fortification and construction. Together, they built strongholds and prepared for war, for they had sighted a massive army of Nevrons, an army led by the real Clair, determined to stop their advance. For a fleeting moment, it was as if the old days had returned, Grandis and humans working side by side, forging weapons and hope alike. But the hope was short-lived. The tide of battle turned as Clair's army, bolstered by the presence of the duelist, overwhelmed them. Expeditioners and Grandis alike fell in the thousands, the battlefield littered with the dreams of another age. When the dust settled, only one of the three great Grandis tribes remained, as they chose to remain safe under the protection of Minoko, the mighty white-haired Gestral, at the shattered train station. The Grandis clung to their traditions, holding eloquence battles to stave off despair and rediscover some semblance of joy. Under Minoko's guidance, they learned to defend themselves, preparing for whatever Nevron incursion might come next, their history and resilience echoing through the ruins of the world they once helped build. Under Golgra's leadership, the Gestrals settled into the rhythms of village life, maintaining a stubborn veneer of ignorance toward the dangers still lurking beyond their borders. While the threat of Nevrons and the memory of the fracture hung in the air, the Gestrals poured themselves into rebuilding, turning their energies to invention and community. As the years passed, some Gestrals, wary of endless combat, sought new diversions for their people. They constructed a theater, staging elaborate plays that almost always devolved into epic, choreographed battles. Others embraced quieter pursuits, taking the time to learn music and bring moments of rare serenity to the village. Yet the call to battle was never far. New arenas sprang up, with jousting becoming a favorite pastime. In these contests, two massive Sacapatats would clash to the cheers and roars of the crowd. Even with these new forms of entertainment, the Gestrals could not help but frame everything as another kind of fight. Young and old alike clung to their passion for combat, and it showed in every corner of the village. In the streets where duels were waged daily, in the constant construction of new Sacapatat guardians, and in the relentless honing of skills, as if the next great challenge was always just around the corner. Among the village's Gestrals was a large, white Gestral, born with a rare, painful illness that left his bones aching. Refusing to let others suffer as he did, he dedicated himself to the study of medicine, learning from the human expeditioners who passed through. Over time, he became the village's chief physician, saving more than 10,000 Gestrals and developing powerful herbal remedies to heal injuries and pain. When the wounded came to him, he would lead them into a mini hibernation, surrounding the queuing Gestrals with the healing smoke of hanging thuribles, bringing them comfort and restoration. One day, a mysterious door appeared at the back of the village. Golgra and the others tried in vain to open it. Eventually, a single Gestral managed to slip through and unlock a hidden cellar beneath the manor. There, he discovered a storehouse overflowing with food and cakes. Succumbing to his gluttony, he literally ate himself to death, leaving behind a cryptic message on the wall. True to Gestral wit, it likely read, "I cannot believe I ate the whole thing." He died, surrounded by abundance, a final slice of cake resting on his stomach, his fate unknown to the rest. Afterward, Golgra stationed a guard at the door to prevent anyone else from attempting to enter. As time marched on, the lives of the Grandis and the Gestrals continued, shaped by tradition, invention, and the ever-present memory of what had been lost. Their ultimate fate remains a mystery, for after the player chooses whether to save or destroy the canvas, neither the Gestrals nor the Grandis are seen again. Their story, much like the world they built and defended, fades into legend, unfinished, unresolved, and waiting for someone to remember. And that is the story of the Gestrals and the Grandis. They were never the legends at the center of the canvas, but they became its foundation. Builders, fighters, inventors, and survivors who carried the spirit of the world forward through every era, every loss, and every rebirth. Their history is not just a record of what was built or broken, but a testament to what it means to endure, to adapt, and to keep the memory of joy alive even when everything else fades. Their fate, like the fate of the canvas itself, remains unfinished, a story that lingers at the edge of every ending, waiting for someone to remember or to dream it into being once more. But before the Grandis, before the Gestrals, before even the first painted city, there was a boy named Verso. Next time on Video Game Lore, we turn our focus to the real Verso Dessendre, the artist, the dreamer, the soul whose imagination shaped every layer of this world, and whose loss changed it forever. And after that, we will be doing our grand finale, the two-part What Happened to All of the Previous Expeditions, told in full with a mix of journal entries and environmental storytelling. If this episode gave you something to think about, remember to like, share, and subscribe. Join the discussion in the comments. Your insight and theories are what make this community special. And be sure that the notification bell is turned on so you do not miss any of the last 3 videos as we wrap up Expedition 33 and start to move into Final Fantasy 16. My name is Vigil, and this has been Video Game Lore, and I will see you in the next one.